Okay, hello everyone. My name is Sean Rector, and this is my personal introduction for Mod 1. So here's a little bit about me. First, I have a bachelor's in communications from Oakland University, which is in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I work part-time as an English teacher at a private girls' Catholic junior high school and senior high school, and at a private high school. I teach second year junior high at the first school and first year senior high at the second. I split my time between both schools. I've been living in Nagoya, Japan for nearly 10 years, long time, and I'm 32 years old. I am married to a Japanese woman, and I have one daughter named Olivia. I am originally from Metro Detroit. My hobbies are playing the guitar, jogging, not so much anymore, but I used to do Krav Maga, and playing video games. So how is my school different this year? First, we have less tests this year because of coronavirus, and we have less tests at both schools. At the girls' Catholic school, we usually have 5 tests, but this year we cut it down to 4. Another thing that's different is I have more personal responsibility at that Catholic school because we've lost a teacher. So I've had to do more classes and teach more students at the same time, and prepare more of the tests and grade more of the papers, etc., etc. Another thing is we have new coworkers at both schools who I've had to coordinate classes with. That's a little different. I've also been trying to implement more technology in my classroom, and I've been doing that after having taken a technology course at Fort Hayes, and I'm also trying to experiment with different instructional models, again, after having taken an instructional design course at Fort Hayes. Here's some extra information about me. Some of my personal goals are: 1, obtain my Master's of Science in Education, brackets ESOL, from Fort Hayes University. Then I want to find a full-time position, teaching position, teaching ESOL, so I can focus my energy on one school instead of having to split my attention between those 2 schools. I feel like that would benefit my students much more because I can put more time into thinking about them and their needs. Eventually, I want to obtain a U.S. teaching license, which will qualify me to teach ESOL or humanities or communications at the 6 to 12 level. Eventually, I want to move back to the States before my daughter enters junior high school. I want my daughter to kind of grow up with some American culture as well. And I also want to make more time in my schedule to exercise because I've been quite busy recently and haven't had a lot of time to do that. Some of the mindsets we learned about in this week's reading were: first, all students can learn, and I definitely agree with that idea. I try to remind myself that every day in my classes. When I see some students that are underperforming, I try to think, this student can learn. How can I make life easier for them to be able to learn? But I also think that being cognizant of socioeconomic barriers and how heavy a burden they can be for some students and how they can obstruct the students' ability to learn is very important. And I think schools should go out of their way to limit these educational barriers and obstacles. 2, teacher collaboration over isolation. I personally have grown the most as a teacher when I collaborate with other teachers and talk about what went right and what went wrong in my classes, and when we share lessons and strategies and plans, and when I see somebody perform teaching well and doing something that the students seem to respond to, I think, and I get an idea to try that in my classes. So I definitely think teacher collaboration is very important. 3, happiness and optimism. So what I get from this section of the article written by Moore, 2017, is that happiness and optimism are the byproducts of recognizing challenges and approaching them with a positive and thoughtful attitude. And I tend to agree with this notion. I kind of see it as a feedback loop, approaching teaching positively, but looking at the challenges and overcoming those challenges will increase your happiness. And increasing your happiness will lead you to want to seek out how to improve your challenges and overcome your challenges even more, which will feed back into itself and make you happier and more optimistic. So I definitely agree with that. Let's look at some of the dispositions. First, confidence. The Moore 2017 article says that, quote, level 5 leaders are, end quote, are highly focused on student learning and equity. It also says that level 5 leaders are, quote, very ambitious for the success of their organization or their cause, end quote. And while I agree that confidence does make great leaders, I would suggest that there is a big difference between a leader that, quote, having confidence to lead despite their critics, end quote, and one that has confidence in spite of their critics. Leaders need to listen to accurate criticism and need to be open to criticism. Otherwise, they can plow ahead with changes that might not be good for their schools. So I think it's important to clarify that difference of, confidence to lead despite their critics and confidence to lead in spite of their critics. 2, risk taker and decisive. I agree with this disposition being an attribute of effective leadership, with the caveat that risk-taking and decisiveness should be combined with collaboration with your staff and your employees and the other teachers and students, and input from coworkers, because taking risks and being decisive is valuable if you're considering the people around you. If you're not, if you're taking risks for the sake of taking risks or because you think it's a good idea without considering what other people think, I think it might not be so effective. Number 3, sense of humor. I totally agree with this being a disposition of effective leaders. A good sense of humor and ability to break the tension and stress of situations goes a long way in creating a positive working environment. And I see this in my classes when we have a test coming up and the students are tired of studying, and if I break the tension with some humor, it's like a release valve, and the students can breathe easier and enjoy their class more and learn more. And the same thing happens with, I can imagine, it happens with coworkers and teachers when the leaders of the school break the tension with some humor, and everyone can feel a little bit more relaxed and at ease in the situation. So I definitely agree with that point. 4, empathetically assertive. This is another point that I completely agree with, as I see how well it works in my class. When I change something in my class, or if I'm asking a lot from the students, I always come at it from a point of empathy, and this allows my students to feel like I'm considering their concerns. Everybody wants to feel like they're heard and understood. So I often think of how I try to interact with my daughter. My daughter doesn't have the words to communicate, so sometimes all the time we have to imagine how she's feeling and what she wants, and she's frustrated when she's not understood. And so that never goes away. Everyone feels frustrated when they're not understood. So showing the people you're working with and the students you're teaching that you understand their concerns is very important. But at the same time, being assertive with your goals and while being sensitive to people's concerns is important, because without being assertive, you can't get things done. So those things need to be together, and are a pair that are complementary to each other. Number 5, learner. So I feel like this is very necessary for setting an example of the importance of proactive self-improvement. For my students, I tell my students that I'm studying my master's right now, and it's important for them to see that, because I want them to see how hard I'm trying, and I know they're trying hard, and I want them to see that self-improvement and learning never ends. And it's important to look at self-improvement with a sense of optimism and joy. So I think that's important too. Some practices. First, focus and prioritizing. I agree with this practice because I feel like it keeps the train moving on time, and because it allows the leaders to prioritize what is needed most at their schools. Number two, examining feedback and data. And I agree with this. By seeking out and examining relevant feedback and data from students, teachers, and parents, a leader can get a better idea of how to proceed with changes or improvements at their schools. Number three, emotional intelligence. This is another thing that I think is a key element to leadership in the classroom and school system. Teachers and leaders need emotional intelligence to deal with the variety of personalities at their schools, and as well as the variety of cultures at their schools. That helps them. That helps create a better atmosphere when you are emotionally intelligent and you know how to deal with different personalities and emotions. The eight principles of ethical leadership. So first, personal courage. I agree with this principle, and I feel like it's sadly not seen as a positive attribute in Japan because of the bureaucracy. Because bureaucracy often supersedes innovation in people's minds. So I've recently come up against that, trying to implement a couple new things at the schools and just hitting a wall with some of the bureaucracy of the administration. And often speaking out against a policy here will only lead to a dead end of just that's the way it is, please follow the rules, that's what it is. So that's frustrating a little bit. Number two, public interest ahead of self. I agree with this principle as well, but I fear that all too often the interest of one group of students is promoted over the interests of another. So, for example, there might be a school that is very heavily focused on the sports, the athletic part of their school, and the interests of those students are often supported over the interests of other students, academic students or art students or whatever. So public interest ahead of self, it has to be everyone. It can't be, thinking. For example, there might be a community that sees like the athletic part of the school as being more important. So you might have more people in the community that think that, but there's still that aspect of the school or those people in the school that think academics is important too. So being mindful of the entirety of the community is very important as well. Number three, self-control, self-discipline, and integrity. This is another principle that I agree with and believe applies to the classroom as well as the school. Showing integrity and self-control and self-discipline allows your students to respect you more and your coworkers to respect you more, and that respect leads to trust. Number four, task and employee centeredness. I agree. It's important to consider both teachers' needs as well as students' needs. Balancing them is the key to creating a good school environment. Number five, recognizing talent. This principle, I believe, is vital to not only improving the quality of your school, but also making it run more smoothly. The more tasks and responsibility you can entrust to your coworkers, the easier your job will become as well. Number six, requiring high ethics from everyone. This principle is very important for quality control and building a set of expectations from the students, staff, and community about what the school is and what the school represents. Number seven, sensitivity and understanding. This is extremely important for making sure there is educational equity in the school system. There are bound to be socioeconomic and cultural differences between students and between teachers. And being understanding of those differences, as well as seeking to minimize the barriers between people, is crucial. And the last one, inclusiveness. I agree that, quote, a sense of belonging is key to gaining trust with an organization, end quote. I would add that it is not only important for gaining trust, but also for cultivating a commitment to the school community. So it's a little bit of my self critique. So about the mindsets, I do believe all students can learn, and I try to promote that in my class as much as I can. Next, I do love collaboration, and as much as I can, I seek to get peer feedback from my other teachers, coworkers about what do you think? Look at this lesson plan. What do you think about it? And I think it makes me a better teacher. Next one. One thing I have to do is I have to push myself to continue finding ways that I can personally improve. And happiness and optimism is a part of this process, and I'm trying to be better at pushing myself to improve rather than just maintaining a status quo. Dispositions. So the confidence part of the disposition I agree with, and one of my disposition is fake it until you make it. And this is something that has helped me. When I first started being a teacher, I wasn't feeling very confident at all, even though I had studied at school and even though I'd had some experience teaching ESL. But I learned after going into several different classrooms and several different schools, new faces all the time, that it's very important to, even if you don't feel confident, to pretend you're confident, because your mind doesn't really know the difference. If you're acting confident, your mind doesn't know how to tell whether you are or not. Because for example, if you go in the room smiling, that creates that emotion in you, and then it will create that emotion in your students as well, hopefully. So that's one of my mindsets, my dispositions as well. Another disposition I have is have trouble with is I can take risks and be decisive. I have that ability, but it's not my default mode, so I have to remind myself to do that. One of my other dispositions is that I do use humor in my classes to emphasize the importance of laughing off mistakes and progressing. And this is especially important for students that are learning a second language, because communicating in a language is all about making mistakes. People don't speak perfectly all the time. So it's important for my students to understand that, especially in Japan, where students are afraid of making mistakes in general. Next, I try my best to be empathetic while assertive, although it can be difficult to slow down and think about how my students are feeling. I have so much going on in my schedule that I often forget to do that, and I have to be better at doing that. Learner, leading by example. Exactly as I said before, my disposition is I try to show the students that I'm still learning and I'm trying to improve myself, and hopefully by my example they will do the same. Practices, focus on prioritizing difficulties. I do have focus and prioritizing difficulties. I try to focus as much as I can. It's quite hard when I have two different schools and different responsibilities, and I've grown a lot in my ability to focus and prioritize, but it's something that I continue to try to improve on every day. So next one, I don't have much experience examining feedback and data, because up until last year, I didn't have my own classes that I was actually assessing. But last year, I got the part-time job at the Catholic girls' school, where I did start to have my own class, which I had to create tests for and grade and assess and all that stuff. So I'm still learning when it comes to that. Next one, dealing with a variety of personalities and cultures has helped strengthen my emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, I think, is key to creating good relationships. And because I've been put way out of my comfort zone by moving to Japan, where the culture is quite different, that has helped me understand and be more understand my students' feelings and be more emotionally intelligent. Next, principles of ethical leadership. Some of my strengths are sensitivity and understanding, inclusiveness. I try to make sure everybody is involved and included and feels welcome in my class. Next, requiring high ethics. I try to set an example of what I expect from my students as far as their behavior and getting things done on time. And I try to set that example by doing that myself. Personal courage. I try as much as I can to push new ideas to the administration to see what we can get done, even though we're coming up against the wall. But I'm trying my best. Self-control, discipline, and integrity. I try to lead by example in that way as well. Task and employee centeredness. I try to focus on trying to include my coworkers who we teach similar classes, so we kind of have to be on the same page. So I always want to be thinking about and cognizant of what they think about what we're teaching and the tasks that we're teaching. Some of my weaknesses are public interest ahead of self. Again, I've got a lot of things going in terms of jobs and things going in terms of studying, and so thinking about the public interest and the students and all that is a little bit hard right now, but I'm trying to work on that. And recognizing talents. I haven't done this as much as I should. I need to lift up students that have improved more and recognize their talents in certain ways. And that doesn't always have to be public. It doesn't always have to be in front of the class, but I need to show students that, recognize that they've improved better with some, sometimes it can be verbal recognition, but I think I haven't done a lot of written recognition or, some kind of not prize, but I need to be better at that, I think. So standard correlation. This assignment reflected NS Standard 2.1 by having us become familiar with professional norms of educational leaders and by having us reflect and communicate what we've learned about those norms. It's relevant. It was extremely relevant to the course content because it allowed us to clearly identify the attributes that high-quality leaders display. So reflection. After having done this assignment, I now have a better idea of how to envision myself as a leader in my school and what steps I can make to become a better leader. Specifically, I have to take more risks and get better at focusing and prioritizing. I want to thank you. These are my references. Thank you. I want to thank you for listening to my video, and I am very interested to listen to all of your videos as well. I hope you have a good class, and I'm very excited to talk more with all of you and comment on your posts. Thank you very much for listening. Have a nice day or nice night.